Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. Sexy dying time. It's Silk Stalkings Killer Cop, Season 3, Episode 11, on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet troll pal Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from the San Diego County area of Palm Beach, Florida. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where usually we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. This time we will be delving into the sexy victims of one USA Network's Silk Stalkings, in the hopes that a sexy victim's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes that we can make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person that I trust, that if I need help with my campaign to become county prosecutor, she will put on a cheap hat for no particular reason to help me gain office, the one and only Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I'm good, but I think you, if you really want to win the public's trust and vote, you really need to wear one of those saucy little prisoner uniform waitress outfits.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That projects everything you want in an authority figure. Someone you want to elect to office is someone who looks like she's a Swiss Miss, like she's bringing out fondue. Is that what that uniform is at the opening soiree?
I mean, I assumed it's supposed to be like an old-timey jail uniform because it's a cop-themed bar.
Oh yeah, she looks like she works at Pirate Dinner Theater, which long ago when I lived in Orlando briefly, they were just starting out, and they had a brochure that they would put in every hotel and motel room, and you would unfold it, and there was a picture of a pirate guy on a jet ski, and the copy that they had overlaid over the picture said, "Surprise, pirates." Now, I'm not going to tell you that I'm a marketing professional, but it turns out I am. And the one surprise you don't find in most pirate shows is pirates. Now, you throw in a Viking, that's a surprise, okay? The jet ski, that's more surprising.
I was going to say, I think that the surprise here is that the pirate is on a jet ski.
Well, I don't want to alarm you and cause you to call the Silk Stalkings, Gina, but we are not alone for this special Valentine's Day episode of Kill by Kill. No, we have a very special guest. He is a returning all-star and returning champion, the one, the only Michael Varrati. How are you doing today, Michael?
Hello. I'm very excited to be here and to rejoin you all to talk about this saucy late night treat.
I happen to revisit Silk Stalkings for reasons I can't begin to say other than it was free and it was streaming. And I lamented, like, I was fascinated with this show, but I wasn't particularly sure why. And you said that you also liked it. And I said, oh, no, we should do this for Valentine's Day. Let's talk about an episode, a typical in the middle of the, many seasons that it was on episode of Silk Stalkings. And you suggested one Killer Cop from season 3. It's episode 11. And the reason we picked it was Rhonda Shear is in it.
Yes. So I actually was a big fan of Silk Stalkings when it aired originally. And I have not seen this particular episode since, the 90s. So I kind of didn't really recall what it was about. But at this moment in time, this was USA Network at its prime, being its weird, scintillating, sexy self before it kind of fell in line with all the other cable networks. And they were kind of pushing the boundaries of like bizarro shows. Like, you're not going to see some of the stuff that ends up on later seasons of Silk Stalkings on Primetime. They really wanted you to know the show was a horny show. Yes. And at the time, USA's kind of like shining star and their kind of bread and butter was the fact that they celebrated the weird and unusual B movies and cult films and sexploitation films. And on Friday and Saturday nights, for the better part of a decade, there was a show called USA Up All Night. And it was hosted on Friday nights by Rhonda Shear, who hosted from here in Los Angeles. And on Saturday nights, it was hosted by one Gilbert Godfrey, who would host it in New York. And they would show all manner of insanity. And it got to the point that movies were getting so much attention that some cult filmmakers were making cuts of films specifically to air on Up All Night. So not only are you seeing like Friday the 13th and, Night of the Creeps and The Toxic Avenger, but then they were making movies like Vice Academy and Bikini Car Wash Company. And I have said in interviews about my own career before that this was the altar at which I worshipped. My life changed when I saw a double feature of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and Return of the Killer Tomatoes hosted by Rhonda. And when you reached out and said, let's do Silk Stalkings, I kind of scanned through the list because I knew because of this Up All Night connection, they had a lot of horror folks pop by and guest spots. But I saw Rhonda's name and I thought, we got to do it. We got to do it for Rhonda Shear.
We do. I watched at the time and I very much enjoyed it. But Gina, what is your relationship to Silk Stalkings? Did I force you to watch this for the first time?
I knew it existed. This is the very first episode I've ever seen. I definitely watched Up All Night, but I knew this existed. It always seemed to be on, and yet I never watched it before.
Yeah, it did have a ubiquitousness to it that I don't think a lot of their other programming had at the time. And there's a particular reason. I just learned it just a couple days ago. So Silk Stalkings was originally part of a block on CBS called Crimetime After Primetime. And they would put it on after local news. So it would be up against The Tonight Show and Nightline and Arsenio Hall between 1991 and 1993. And that's when they contracted David Letterman to start the Late Show there. So all of a sudden, all 8 of those, or 10 of those shows actually, were, cast off into the wind. And I think there was one vampire detective show that went off into syndication called Forever Night.
Forever Night. That one I did watch.
That's one I actually also own all 3 seasons of. It was imported from Canada, and it was recently re-released by Mill Creek as like a complete series DVD. But if you have the old DVDs, it was like literally pan and scan from whatever VHS masters. And the first episode pilot of Forever Night has the Primetime logo on it.
Nice.
That it was just like someone at the studio was like, whatever. But it's only on that pilot. But I love it. I mean, it gives a little bit of a dose.
Yes. If you ever wanted to hear a vampire say sorry, it's all there for you.
It's a good match with Werewolf, the Canadian werewolf show on Fox during the 80s,
which will never see the light of day due to some insane rights issue. Like, people pine for it all the time, but it's never going to see the light of day. It's like locked in a box or somewhere with Walt Disney's head.
I think it was a music issue.
Like, I couldn't even find it when I worked at Fox. That's how locked away that shit is. So yeah, Rhonda Shear was the Friday night host. And I was going to say, like, Vice Academy was a very prototypical, anything that came across as softcore, anything that allowed B-movie starlets to run around in lingerie so that you could see a lot of stuff, but not the things that would really get you in trouble. And there were very obvious edits so that they would sell VHS tapes of the unedited version there. And yeah, it was, I don't know. I listen, I was young and I was horny. Okay. It's like that excuse in Real Genius when they find Kent, naked with Jell-O. He was hot and he was hungry and he was there. So, I admit, I know I'm not supposed to be horny on Maine and all that shit, but, Silk Stalkings, and this episode is very primed with it, with this cold open, is meant to be sexy, baby. And
yeah, well, I mean, it is this is a show, if any show could be described as horny on Maine, Silk Stalkings is one of those. Yes. Because it's exactly what you said. I mean, USA Network really, really excelled in kind of selling you the idea that you were seeing more than you actually were, because it was still a cable network. So they edited a lot of stuff out, but like you're there and you're watching Silk Stalkings, which I feel is like kind of the safer Red Shoe Diaries for like cable. And it was wild because I always describe this show to people that it's not necessarily a show about sex crimes, although this episode happens to. But it's a show about sexy crimes, and USA Network wants you to know the difference.
Yeah, it's definitely I was reading the plot. I'm like, oh, so this is sort of like Special Victims Unit. No, it's not like Special Victims Unit because Special Victims Unit is bleak and depressing and just sort of emphasizes how terrible everybody is, and here it's just sort of they're sexy crimes. You're right, that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, it's the hoi polloi of Palm Beach, Florida, via San Diego, and because of this, they're all having sex constantly, and the crime just sort of happens in the middle. It's just sort of like something like, we were all just going to bone, and then whoopsie doodle, this person ended up dead. And then an hour later, the crime solved. And
then there are lots of extras walking around aerobics outfits.
If you gave me a drink for every time I saw someone in biker shorts in Silk Stockings, I would be Charles Bukowski. I would literally, my brain would be filled with gin. It's a weird time capsule. And so why not? We've been breaking formula here at Kill by Kill because people don't like late era Nightmare on Elm Street. So we're hoping you might like this. And it's Valentine's Day, baby. We're doing this literally the night before this will come out. Just like a proof of life here. Today, they released Batman footage that I still can't see. People tell me there's a Batman in there. Couldn't tell you.
You have to wait. It takes a while for the screen to clear.
Okay.
Wait, is this the Robert Pattinson Batman?
Yeah.
It's like a costume, whatever they call it.
Costume tests.
Yeah, costume test, and it's literally just a very, very dimly lit shot. Everybody's like losing their fucking minds over it.
Well, let me ask you this on the eve of Valentine's Day, since this is being brought up. Who do you trust more to solve a crime, Batman or Sergeant Rita Lee Lance and Sergeant Chris Lorenzo?
Oh, that is a very salient question. Certainly, if I want to do it within the bounds of the law, I'm going with Rita because she's a straight arrow. Chris plays outside the lines. He needs Rita to really keep him in line. Batman kills a lot of people, even inadvertently, even though he tries not to. But he is kind of, I don't know, a little bit sexier. I mean, the costume sometimes, like, it's pretty fucking hot.
Yeah. Well, there's the Silk Stockings episode right there. Is, people who wear superhero fetish gear.
Oh, love it. Let's reboot this motherfucker. Let's make it happen.
It's ready. You know what? What are Mitzi Capture and Rob Estes doing right now? I think the Netflix revival of Silk Stockings is primed and ready.
I was going to say, I imagine they're probably attending a lot of Silk Stockings fan conventions.
I would like to hope that there are Silk Stockings fan conventions.
Oh, there has to be. I mean, it was on for like 8 years. There has to be a somewhat of a robust fan base for them.
I have to believe it lives in the minds of people, but it might not be at the forefront. As to what they're doing, I have not seen Mitzi Capture on anything in quite some time. Rob Estes, I'll be honest with you, if he hasn't been a villain in a CW DC show, I will give you $10 because it feels like he's the kind of guy who's like, well, we need like a corporate raider type, someone who's like a bad businessman. Someone get Rob Estes on the phone, and he's like there in a flash, and he's got the same rectangle head.
He was like 1-2 punching Melrose Place at this time too.
Oh yeah. He almost abandoned the whole thing, and then they rewrote it in the contract. There's a weird thing that I read that he and she flipped who had top billing every week.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it was very equitable that way. And the weird thing about the pilot is, and this just needs to be mentioned, that both these people very plainly say, we should be boning, but we can't because we're partners. So as soon as one of us gets promoted or transferred, then our private parts can touch.
Yes. Which, you know what I have to say, for as sexy as Silk Stalkings seeks to be, our heroes always believe in the sexiness of consent and following the sexual playbook laid out by their own personal moral codes.
It's very, very true.
See, I just couldn't help notice that Mike Post looked at his own bass line from the Law and Order theme for this theme song.
It is a damn good bass line. I mean, you got to give it up there. There's a lot of stuff that seems to be recycled. Let's get into it. We open up as Gina mentioned at Society, which, if I remember correctly, a Batman villain, the crown prince of crime himself, told me is something we live in. And we're introduced to Rhonda Shear, who is dressed like she's a bar hostess on Battlestar Galactica.
I mean, this is pretty much what Rhonda was wearing nigh constantly at this era. I kind of believe that she just kind of popped over from the USA Up All Night set and did this sort of thing, and then went right back and was like, all right, y'all, tonight.
She got an Amtrak down.
Yep.
Did this in a night, right back up. And so she is, we're led to believe that she's a cop groupie. And so when she is, we are first introduced to her when a guy at the bar says, hey, let's have sex again. And she's like, no, thanks.
The dialogue in this is pretty good.
Yeah.
But I think this cold open is so indicative of like the vibe of Silk Stalkings, because like, let's just examine some of these ideas that are thrown out in the first 30 seconds. It's a cop bar that's sort of like a sexy cop bar.
Yeah.
And then there's a cop groupie, and this woman's thing is she goes to the sexy cop bar to like scout and sex up cops.
Yeah.
And then we find out later that she cuts the button off their uniform shirts.
Yeah, so she can have a sexual conquest moment.
But the buttons are all very decorative. They look like the buttons that would be on a formal coat. So is she primarily picking them up at funerals and award ceremonies? Because that would be the only time you would wear that decorative button coat.
Well, Rhonda did host all the Police Academy films, so I kind of feel like that maybe it was just well-timed.
Yeah, a lot of graduations. She heads outside, and that is where she propositions an on-duty cop named Parker to go have sex at her place. And we immediately cut to her bedroom, which is awash in pastels.
Yes.
Shear is given the monumental task of not exposing her nipples during the sex.
This is remarkable. I actually wrote this down, how good the blocking is in this scene. I mean, it doesn't look natural at all, but she does do a very good job of only showing just enough side boob to get a late night rating.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a tough task for her, and she manages to make it come off. But in the middle of their lovemaking, Shear calls out the name of Tom as she's begging for more love. And so this means that she's having sex with Parker. She calls out Tom. Hopefully, she's also fucking a guy named Colonel. So we have a foursome of Colonel Tom Parker and her. And Parker's like, I'm through with this. I'm walking out. Cut to a pair of Murder Beach style black gloves. They belong to a patrol cop, but which one? When the cop pulls Shear over, she's murdered, exposing a lot of cleavage style. Cut to opening credits.
The longest opening credits in TV show history. I love the Silk Stocking opening because it's a solid minute of theme song and just like montagey things that I think that people in the 90s thought were sexy. It's like, here's a briefcase and a saxophone and like perhaps a martini. And then these two people are passing off like a dossier, but also a machine gun and a palm frond. And you're just like, why is this still happening?
And a glistening torso that does not appear to belong to anybody in the cast.
And a tarantula on silk sheets? What is happening there? Why is that blonde legs akimbo standing nearly on top of a Ferrari? I don't know, but every time I watch it, I just exhale. Like,
it's a long opening credit sequence, but unlike Netflix, I never skip it.
No, there's so much to catch. There's so much to learn.
Yes.
The other thing is, it was originally in its CBS version supposed to have one section of it which would expressly be part of that episode, but then they dropped it after the first one. Like, it's too much. Like, let's just keep it the way it is. Keep that tarantula where it is. Keep the flowy Silk Stockings credit wipe on there. Perfecto. So after opening credits, we get our typical Silk Stockings opening monologue. This time it's delivered by Mitzi Kepcher. Now, for those of you who don't know Mitzi, she was voted most likely to wear a miniskirt for an entire decade in high school. She plays Sergeant Rita Lee Lance, and then Rob, the flesh and hair triangle Estes, is Sergeant Chris Lorenzo. When we open up, they're attending a campaign luncheon, and Mitzi's opening monologue contains this phrase: "Those with ambition want to achieve, and those with envy simply want." Fuck you, Aaron Sorkin. I've got a new dialogue god now.
Which, when you think about it, has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the plot, with the rest of the episode. Like, that has no relevance to the plot or anything that happens in it.
Yeah, is the lesson here that someone is envious? I guess I guess you could twist it into that, but that would not be my main takeaway from the plot of this particular episode. Rita is resplendent in a dusty yellow, while Chris is wearing a disturbingly blue suit jacket and a tie chosen from my father's closet. Both are eating free food at the DA's election campaign luncheon. I guess he's running for higher office. And he's got a sexy political consultant who definitely wants to do a half gainer into Chris's pants.
Yes, and this particular person, Kate Hodge, she is a horror alum because she was in Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, as well, if I'm not mistaken, the lead actor of the She-Wolf of London, another 90s joint.
Ooh, I don't know that I've caught that one. I might have to check that out. Yeah, she's got quite a dress on. Good for her. But this is one of those BC plots that seems to come up over and over through the bulk of the episode, but it's kind of like time filler. But they get a beep on their beeper just to remind you this happened in 1993, and we cut to the lush brown coastal hills of Florida. This is supposed to take place in Florida, everyone. Florida, not known for its brown hills. And this, we learn Chris arrives there and he's talking to the coroner, and she tells us that the victim was strangled and, quote, died in a panic, which I don't think is something a coroner can actually tell you.
I don't know if the coroner can tell that someone had, quote, so much to live for.
Yeah, this coroner's exposition, though, is kind of amazing. Because she just offers up a lot of armchair sleuthing. But she also is the second woman of the episode who's like, okay, we got a dead body here, but Chris, hey.
Have you noticed that you're sexy? Because the rest of us have all noticed.
We're talking about it back at the office.
But also, Chris, later in the episode, literally sexually harasses her in the middle of a hallway. And I'm just like, holy hell. What is happening with the harassment seminars at this place? They just, it's a Silk Stockings unit. You know, we play fast and loose around here.
Yeah, I do appreciate that when you watch this by the lens of 2019, there's a lot going on at the Palm Beach Police Department that I think that you could show this episode to like any kid today and be like, let's talk about the problematic elements of the show.
It might only have problematic elements, actually. The other piece of information we learned from this very helpful coroner is that the name of this, of Rhonda Shear's poor lamented character is Cindy Blaine, aged 23.
Sure.
Is this science fiction? Are there flying cars in this particular show? 23? Who made that determination?
I had no choice. I had to look it up. She was actually 39 when she made this episode.
She looks fan-fucking-tastic. Let's put that out there. Rhonda Shear looks great in this episode. She's not 23. She's just not a 23-year-old. There's no particular reason to make her 23 either, because she has a palatial mansion and a very expensive car and no job that we've heard about. And as far as I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, cop fucking still does not pay as highly as I might like it to.
Yeah, right? That's the only thing we find out about her is that she is 23, likes fucking cops.
Yeah, I mean, we're not really given a lot of information. It is interesting, the whole world of, but you know, maybe the world of cop grouping. I feel like there's a Reddit subthread that I need to like maybe investigate. Sure. Maybe there are things we just don't know.
That's very, very, very true. There could be an underground economy that we're simply not aware of. So please excuse our ignorance. We also get the first time, but not the last, of Chris sitting in the driver's seat of a car and pantomiming how a crime went down. I don't know if it's something he did all the time, but he does it several times in just this single episode. So that's great.
He's profiling.
He is profiling. It's off the top of his crazy suit jacketed head.
Yeah, they give a lot of information. Where they sound like they know what they're talking about, but I feel like a lot of it was made up for the show. Like in the later, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but someone is made to look like they've committed suicide. And one of them says, well, how does a cop normally kill themselves? Well, they put the gun in their mouth. And I'm like, is that true?
Yeah, citation needed for that one.
I don't know where you would find that out.
No, I think rewatching the show, there is kind of like an awareness that a lot of the crime exposition is sort of like, we just need to power through this to get you back to why you're here. The cheese. Because like there's like these weird subplots where it's like, oh yeah, running for city council, or this is going on, but let's get it done. Let's get it done. And then let's get Chris on a date. Or
we got to make sure that everyone remembers that Chris is a dude and that ladies want that dude.
Exactly.
It's very important that everyone figure this out. This is where we find the cop uniform buttons, which appear to number in the double dozens at least.
Yes.
She is a very busy lady, and God bless her. No problem there. Honestly, the reason why she dies has very little to do with the fact that she likes having sex with cops. It's just like this weird thing about her. Like, she also had mini skirts. Like, it doesn't end up mattering in the end. But that cop Parker arrives resplendent in salmon. This show has a lot of salmon going on. Like, was there a sale on salmon fabric?
Oh, yeah. The color palette of Silk Stalkings is remarkable. It's like someone took a coupon down to Contempo Casual and just went crazy.
Yeah, he's got that, and he's got that Kevin Costner in The Bodyguard Caesar haircut.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was everywhere. Yeah, you can you can practically see the math equations float past Rita's face when she learns that Cindy only collected buttons from the first time she had sex with someone. There's like a literal, her eyes like beam up and down as she's doing the math in her head. Parker lies and says that he talked to Cindy when he was getting off duty before he clocked out, right around the time of death. So he's lying Spoiler alert, he had shit all to do with her death. So I'm not particularly sure why he's lying, because he's going to be grilled pretty hard for lying. So I don't know. He's guilty of something.
This episode really is working double time to try and give you so many red herrings, which I kind of appreciate, because everybody's alibi and motives for lying are usually, once revealed that they lied, not expounded upon in any like satisfactory way.
Yeah, you're right.
It's
He
like-
didn't have any reason to lie after all that, did he?
Well, he knew the victim, but they know that as soon as he shows up at the house. So already he's putting himself in the light that, but he didn't end up having sex with the victim before she died, but they did have a fight. So and he was also on duty. So like he probably would have come up on some sort of reprimand for that, I guess.
I don't know. I think Rita and Chris have sex on duty all the time.
It's entirely possible that they have a very sex friend thing happening.
Right.
Because they give each other fuck eyes all the time. And also, a little bit later, we're treated to Rob Estes's ER era George Clooney impression of moving far too much in a static shot. There's lots of head bobs and half smiles, and he moves his shoulders a whole bunch, like he doesn't know what arms do when a camera's on. And you're like, what's happening here? This is the third season of this show, but I guess it was his shtick.
He occasionally speaks and dresses like he was by evening trying to audition to be in Swingers.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, I bet you he really wanted it, for sure. He would have loved to have been in Swingers. And he is negotiating with a guy in the motor pool to fix up his shitty car, which you think is going nowhere. And then he keeps talking to that guy and keeps talking to that guy. And finally I wrote down, I hope this is going somewhere. And guess what? It went somewhere. But before we get to that, let's get introduced to suspect number 2. He's a patrol officer named Daniels, who appears to be 6'45". Yeah. He's a tall dude. He's like a real ham sandwich. He's very broad shoulders. Why we don't get him with his shirt off is a real fucking travesty. Come on, Silk Stalkings. Like, come on.
Well, they want us to know that he loves gloves a lot. That's like the real key to this scene. Yes. Because that's the other, again, I think that Silk Stalkings both knew what the audience wanted / didn't put a lot of stock in the audience's deductive skills. So they kind of wanted to be like, hey, remember when the killer had gloves? He loves gloves. If you weren't paying attention, gloves.
If you were doing the dishes while watching this, guess what? Gloves.
There needs to be a little like student bodies, like Arrow pointing at his gloves every now and then. With a little dink, dink.
Yeah, he's really making sure he brings them up into frame. Let's cut to Captain Lipshitz's office. Not much happens in this scene. I just wanted to say Lipshitz. I love this guy. He remained a staple of this program for seasons and seasons and seasons. It seems to have been the only thing he was known for or did. I'm sure he had a long career, but I've only ever seen him on Silk Stalkings. And quite frankly, that's the only place I want to.
He's a little bit of a poor man's Dan Hedaya.
Yes.
Yeah, I could see it.
He always has pens in his shirt pocket, but they're very evenly spaced out.
I was going to say, what I really like about his character in this particular episode, which actually feels very of the now, is how committed he is to making sure that people don't think the police are dirty. And it's sort of like, the world we live in, this is actually a real life thing that gets, brought up a lot when there's internal investigations. And we see this in the news where people are incited to anger because police officers who do bad things get off. So, like, he is the moral compass of this. He's like, you might have heard this on the TV news, but I am not that cop.
Right. Yeah, he seems genuinely concerned about women's safety, in light of this possible cop that's going around and killing people. And it's such a refreshing change of pace from our Patreon episode, which was the seduction, and featured a police detective who, whenever anybody complained to him about a crime or feeling in danger, his response was literally, "What do you want me to do about it?"
I'm a cop. Come on. Like, I got a lot of things to do. What? Investigate crimes. A guy breaks into your house.
I investigate this crime. There's just going to be another crime tomorrow. So yeah, I appreciated Captain Lipshitz's sincerity.
It's very nice. And he gets a big drama moment later on, but we'll get to that. We get to see Daniels in action on the streets of San Diego. He flirts with a girl in pleated biker shorts.
Yeah, well, 90s.
90s in all capital letters. Mint green, by the way. That now won't be the last time we see mint green. He pants her ass on her way back into the car. And that's when we learn, like, not only is he an asshole, but he's also a creep, which I think we kind of gathered when he's like, hey, look at my gloves, because that's another thing we learned from Cobra. People who wear gloves too much, that you got to take that shit off. All right?
Suspicious.
It's very suspicious.
Well, you're also in Florida. Like, your fingers are going to be sweaty.
I know.
What are you doing?
What are you doing? Yes. Look, is he eating with that like Cobra does? Ugh, gross. Anyways, Daniels claims that he was with his ex between 2 and 5 on the night of the crime. So this is something that his ex-wife denies immediately one scene later.
Right.
Daniels also says that he didn't know Cindy. It turns out she was the cause of his the breakup of his marriage. So
yeah, let's talk a little bit about the marriage, because he is his ex is kind of a key factor to his character's arc.
Yeah.
She had married this bad cop who she couldn't wait to get away from. So, of course, she did what I would do if I was trying to get away from a cop and get a job as a server at a cop bar.
Which he hangs out at.
Yeah.
But she's dressed as a sexy prisoner. So there's that. So she's got that going for her, right?
Yeah, lots of choices being made here.
Oh, man. Yeah. And the next day, Rita and Chris grilled Daniels in Lipshitz's office. Mitzi is now resplendent in her own mint green pantsuit, and Estes is wearing a shade of red that should only be used on a couch in an Old West prostitution parlor. It's very specific.
He might have repurposed the upholstery of the couch, because who knows what crime they investigated prior to this.
It's very, very true. It's fuzzy, like something that you would literally upholster something in. It's an odd choice. It's a very heavy fabric, once again, for Florida. So anyways, Parker is dismissed. They bring in Daniels, who I believe during the scene, it struck me, he might be the Incredible Hulk version of Rob Hubel.
Yeah.
He just has he has Rob Hubel's patois, which struck me as odd. And of course, they basically said, you lied to us. And Daniel denied everything and also gives nothing away. And the scene just demonstrates what a fucking loony bin of an art director, whoever it was, who made the offices in Silk fucking Stalkings. Let's talk about it, everyone.
I think the real heroes of this show are the costume department and the production design, because Stephen J. Cannells, who created Silk Stalkings, had a very long and prolific career in TV, and most of his shows were definitely more serious in tone. This is wackadoo from jump, and it's sort of like someone just gave someone a color wheel and was like, "All right, Cindy, go crazy," and that's and I love it. I love the idea that they were just let's slap up a neon tube. Yeah. Let's put everyone in bright colors. I mean, it looks less like a police office, like a police department, and more like the lobby of a Holiday Inn Express.
Especially with the cutouts of palm trees on the doors,
yes,
which are very odd. And then the yellow velour glasswork that separates Lipshitz's office from the bullpen are like, who made this decision? He should have some level of real privacy. And everything, and I mean everything, is lit by a neon tube placed at shin level. It's a very odd lighting technique. The filing cabinet is surrounded by neon. None of the filing cabinets are labeled, and there's a giant silhouette of a single ceiling fan. It's like, are we in some sort of is a Batman villain working here? It feels like a Batman villain should be working here.
Honestly, there is kind of a comic book color palette to the world of Silk Stalkings. The other thing that I do think is very interesting, and I noticed it on this because I've revisited some episodes recently, but watching this, it kind of struck me that they really, really want you to know that they're in Palm Beach when they're out in the world, because every sign for something, it's not just like bike shop, it's Palm Beach bike shop or PBPD mechanic. It's like and you both know, living anywhere, like, yes, occasionally there's a sign that indicates the town you're in, but not like that. You're not like, I'm not walking up the street here in Studio City and it's like Los Angeles grocery store, Los Angeles Carl's Jr. No. So it's sort of like, it's wild. Like, in case you, as the viewer, are too distracted by staring into the dreamy eyes of Rob Estes, they're like, remember, Palm Beach.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, but it makes it stand out. It doesn't look like any other procedural at the time. And I do think some of the other USA shows started to pick up the aesthetic of it. And like that one show about the cops on bikes.
Pacific Blue.
Oh my God.
That sort of picked up on this vibe.
I would totally, if I had a time machine, all I would do is go back and watch old USA Network television because I love how bizarre it was. Because around this time, you've got Silk Stalkings, Pacific Blue, and for 5 seasons, and no one seems to remember, the Weird Science television series.
Yeah.
Which was just wild.
It is.
Oh, and Duckman, the animated series about a duck. Voiced by Jason Alexander. That's the series pitch. You don't need to know anything else.
A sexy, in quotes, Duckman. It's a very, very odd fucking show. I
think that it was a network mandate that sexy had to be kind of like involved in everything. I did actually, out of sheer gross curiosity, rewatch an episode of the Weird Science TV show. And I did kind of what we did here, where I just picked something somewhere in the middle. And Gary and Wyatt are struggling in school, and Lisa uses her cyber genie powers to change all the subjects in school to be things that teenage boys would know about, like the history of the bikini and pizza folding and like sexy babes 101. And it's sort of appalling now, but also it's like someone wrote this, and for 5 seasons it was on the air. So.
Also, Sexy Babes 101, they really need to go to 101? I don't know. They've been teen boys for a while now.
I'm kind of like, does Lisa hate these kids? Like, I kind of feel like she should. She's an omnipotent being who's just like, cool, super glad that this is what I'm doing this week.
Yeah, sadly.
Like, we could be going to Mars, but you want like a Cheese Whiz house. Done.
Something I can do very quickly with low-grade CGI.
Exactly.
This is where Chris is telling the coroner that Chris tells the coroner that all the dead bodies must get erections when she walks into the room.
Correct. Yes, he does say that. And she, to her credit, goes with it.
She's just like,
she shouldn't go with it.
You're bad.
I love her.
And yet, you know what? I was a young adult in the early 90s, and yeah, that is kind of how we would address, off-color remarks. Is just kind of stop.
Right. I kind of love this actress, and I have no recollection of her beyond this episode, but her choices for every scene she's in are wild, and it's kind of like she's acting in one show and they're acting in an entirely different show, and I love it. Like, I don't know, because he's just like, oh my God, the dead body is getting erection. She's like, tee-hee, stop. I would leave. And you're like, yeah, because like if this was a Dick Wolf produced show, that would be a thing that you would want to leave. Like,
yeah,
There are dead bodies down there, Chris. There are dead bodies down there.
It's not okay. The information she has is that Cindy was raped before death. So that means like out in the open on a sidewalk next to a cop car with the lights on, which, okay. And also that she was strangled by someone wearing gloves. Gloves, you say?
Like gloves a cop might wear?
Quite possibly.
Which I think Rita pretty much goes there. She's like, you know who wears a lot of gloves, cheats to camera? Police officers.
But then they kind of play it off, but then they buy back into it. It's this whole, they really stretch out the scene.
Now, this is what I was talking about at the top of the episode, though, where I was saying it's a show that's more about sexy crimes than sex crimes. And this episode's kind of unique in the way that it actually is about a sex crime. And I mean, I would have to revisit the whole series for a quotient, but this is sort of more heavy than Silk Stalkings usually gets.
Yeah.
Like there's always sex involved in the crime and there's usually some sort of aggression, but it's not always kind of the focus. So that they went dark with this is kind of fascinating because it's like, it's an episode about an abuse of power by a potential police officer, and you're like, "What is Silk Stalkings taking a stand right now?"
Was this their Emmy for your consideration episode? Do you think?
Oh my god! I sure hope that someone got nominated for an Emmy for this.
I
Hopefully, the production design and the costume department.
I can't remember what the. Do you think this was nominated for a Cable Ace Award?
I love the Cable.
Oh
Ace
yeah,
Awards.
this has Ace written all over it.
Oh yeah. 100%.
One of my ongoing jokes that no one on Twitter has really seems to clue in on is every award show. I always tweet that I am on my way to host the Cable Ace Awards and that I really hope people show up this year. And there's always like a smattering of people who think it's funny, but no one has clocked that for a decade, every award show night, I make the same joke.
One day people will understand your genius. They go back to Society, the cop bar, and Daniel's ex-wife tells us that he was an abusive husband, and so she allowed him, and she left him, but then allowed him to come over the night of the crime and was there from between midnight and 5 a.m. He's supposed to be on duty, by the way.
Right.
And then just when you think, well, that sounds like an obvious lie, she walks away from two detectives, goes right to Daniels, who's semi-hiding in the corner, and says, all right, you happy I lied fucking for you? And he's like, oh.
Do they not see him? It's like 2 p.m. at a bar.
Yes. And he's also gigantic. He's not like the night slasher at Cobra. He does not fade into the background. He doesn't blend.
Maybe. Like, hear me out here. Maybe the gloves are like Clark Kent's glasses. And when he's not wearing the gloves, he is invisible to the eyes of Chris and Rita. It's like his gloves, Clark Kent's glasses, Hannah Montana's wig. These are the things that make him disappear.
Yes. This is where I wrote my notes. So much time spent with this mechanic. This has to lead somewhere.
You know what? I'm going to tell you, like, is it spoilers? Can we talk about this yet?
Sure. Yeah, why not?
I was like, the mechanic did it from the first scene with him because it was so it's what I call Murder, She Wrote rules. Sure. He's the least likely subject because he's the most chummy with the lead, whereas everybody's like arching around. It's like no one even has like a semi-questionable ally. They're like, I have lied and I'm mustache twisting. Whereas the mechanic's just like, golly gee, Chris, I really think that we could be friends and it would be great if I could go on a ride along with you. I'm like, this guy did it. Because not for any better reason than they're trying double time to make us think it's everybody else.
I thought also, I would have said, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say also for you cult movie nerds, the guy who plays the mechanic is also the dude from Teen Witch who does the Top That rap. You're welcome.
Wow.
Oh my God. This is so
I mean, the second he came on screen, I was like, why do I know that face? And then it just hit me. His name is Noah Blake. He played Roy Hogan. Teen Witch is it. Like that's the big moment. He was
comes around.
he was
to
Rhett.
Teen Witch. Yeah.
It took me. I probably was as soon as Daniels was eliminated, I'm like, oh, it's the mechanic, okay, because it's that. What is it? The law of economical characters or something like when all other characters have been eliminated, it's that one. And I figured because he spends so much time. I thought he was a regular character. The way initially, the way Rob Essie's just talking to him, I'm like, oh, okay, here's that mechanic. He's this quirky, supporting character. I was like, oh wait, no, this guy has never shown up in an episode before. This is just an all new character, because they're trying so hard to create this sense of familiarity. To shock the audience into, oh, it's this mechanic, okay. And what I think is funny is towards the end of the show, after they figure out it's him, and then there's a big police chase, and then he's killed. Rob Essie's like, I don't understand. He seemed like such a nice guy, and I'm like, is this your first murder case?
Right.
This is it's just such a I would think that a cop of all people would not be swayed by someone being nice as a reason to eliminate them as a suspect.
Right.
It's a real swing and a miss from the Silk Stalkings crew that they don't put this together, that he has access to all these cars, that he knows all of them well, that he's just rolled into town, that he already has several notices on his jacket. But nope, they don't. A bunch of mishigas happens in the middle of here. Like we see Rita is walking around with this massive day planner. And for our younger members of the audience, a day planner was what we did before smartphones. You carried around a leather-bound calendar the size of Stephen King's The Stand. And that told you where to go and had people's addresses in it, and you could take notes. It's really insane. Chris goes on a date with the girl from Leatherface. The Chainsaw 3. Her house is more blue than a James Cameron movie. They also drink wine from silver goblets.
I suspect so they didn't actually have to put a liquid in the glass.
Oh, that makes a lot more sense. I assumed a king was coming over later.
No, but I did very much clue into their drink acting because it's something I'm obsessed with. And like she takes a beat to make it look like she swallows. Rob Estes is just like, nope.
No.
He just like puts it to his lips, sets it down. And he's like, let's talk about why I'm really here.
He does. Yeah, he really plays coy. She is toying with all of his ears multiple times, and he's not really sure what is happening there, but he should be, because everyone is trying to do a half gainer down his pants constantly on the show, and he never picks up on it, and he really should. The next
she
day,
kisses him, and he's still like, what's happening here? What kind of detective are you, Chris? Like,
is this part of the election campaign? The kissing? I don't know how voting works. I am but a mere police officer. So the next day, it turns out a lady gets pulled over by another cop wearing gloves, and she is almost killed, but then speeds away just in the nick of time. And so she shows up in Lipshitz's office, which is a real tongue twister. And they just like, oh, well, thank God you didn't die. Now you can escort yourself out. Rob F says
her name is Jean. They make a point to say her name just to send her home.
Yes. Estes is wearing a maroon mock turtleneck. Just in case you wanted to know what era this took place in. It's definitely the mid-90s. There's also there should be a neon painting at the neon sign pointing at the mechanic that says, this is the guy who did it, but all the neon is being used in the police department's filing cabinet system. So we don't have room for it. And
they don't have labels, so they have to see the files somehow.
It's very, very true. You don't have overhead lighting because that's simply illuminating the one overhead fan. A phrase that is used in this portion of the episode is Lipshitz Fit, which I very much enjoyed. We learned that Daniels may have used his squad car for sex.
Ew.
Yeah. Which who wants to have
Also,
sex in the back of a police car?
Again, and I'm not sure about their police work that goes into this. They say some of it may not have been consensual, and I'm like, I don't know how you could figure that out just by looking at a car seat.
Yeah. Again.
Yeah.
She had a lot to live for. So there's a lot of forensics.
There's some like Sherlock thing going on where like you're just kind of getting into the mind of the killer here.
Yeah.
Well, what's also interesting is this in the scene too, where they're like, there was some sex. He was known for picking up women on the beat, and some of it may not have been consensual. And Lipshitz is like, the fuck? Like, why have I not heard about this yet? And then Rita's just sort of like, no, one made a complaint. Let's talk about police work, guys. Like, rarely, like, I mean, I think we now know in the Silk Stalkings world, like, you could murder someone, and as long as no one complains, no one gives a shit.
It's Palm Beach, Michael. What are you going to do?
This is an episode about an abuse of power.
Yeah, that's much more important.
Yes.
So warrant is put out for Daniel's arrest. His wife won't hide him. When she goes, you showed up to a cop bar to hide from the police.
And he's like, I didn't know where else to go. I don't know. The highway, maybe? The bus station? Yeah, the bus station, perhaps?
No Palm Beach police officer, including our leads, tends to like really think things through.
No. So eventually, I guess he decides to just turn himself in. He pulls into a very lonely the police department parking structure.
Also
underpopulated.
Complete with neon.
Yes, very neon lit, colored neon. Very important. And then shots ring out and we go to commercial. It turns out that it appears, at least at first glance, that he might have killed himself. We later learned that he didn't. But upon hearing this, Lipshitz stands in the middle of the parking lot next to his car, and as if this is going to be his scene that he's going to submit to for a Cable Ace Award, says, and I wouldn't do anything different.
He says it twice in case you were not listening the first time.
Yeah, well, maybe you were taking things out of the washing machine and you missed it the first time. So he's going to reiterate it. It's important. It's a vaunted acting technique.
And that's where we get that baffling conversation about how it is known, apparently, that when cops commit suicide, they do it a certain way.
Yeah. The exact quote is, most cops would eat their own gun. Which I don't.
It's like like you said, I need data on this.
Yeah, this is a real pre-CSI sort of cop show. They don't even worry about it. It's like that opening scene in Cobra, where he starts listing out statistics that sound right to him, but may have no connection to actual reality.
Yeah.
But from this point on, the game is afoot. We learn that a gun was stolen from the armory. The killer had to be someone with access to cop cars. The mechanic, perhaps? Oh, you mean like the dude you've been forced to listen to in every act of this show? No. Yes.
My favorite is when they're like, a gun went missing from the evidence locker, wherever it is, or like the storage unit.
Yeah.
Months ago. I kind of would be, the next question should be, hey, who did the follow-up on that? Yeah. Anyone? No? Okay, great, cool. Was it because there were no complaints, perhaps?
Oopsie doodle, we lost a gun. Turns out it was used in a crime. Oh, well, where do you want to get lunch? So this is when everything seems to break down, because now you've got the cop killer mechanic breaking all of his own rules. He pulls over a pretty lady in the middle of the day, something he's not known to do.
He's looking around like, no one will see me in this parking lot.
Right. In a major metropolitan area.
This full parking lot that looks like it's in a shopping mall. No one will see me drag this woman
with the sirens on. Yeah.
With this drag.
Where's he at? It must be the Palm Beach parking lot.
Near the Palm Beach Bank and Trust. Yeah. And he gets spotted by a helicopter immediately. And they have a bit of a chase in which very large profile vehicles don't make corners very well. I'm surprised we don't see a hubcap fly off. Usually would see that sort of thing. And then he's shot dead in the street. Like the scumbag he is. Bye, cop mechanic. Fuck you.
Wow. I'm leaving Chris with the question of who's going to repair his car now.
Yeah, top that, Chris. Top that. Then what really, really iced it for me was this rejoinder in that Act 6 sort of right before closing credits segment where Rita opines, I bet if we looked at everywhere he had been, we'd probably find lots of dead women. Which, are you going to do that? Are you gonna, like,
but you know what? That's out of our jurisdiction.
Let an intern in on that one. Maybe a secretary could make some fucking calls and get some cold cases solved.
5 o'clock. It's Miller time. time to get down to society. It's 2-for-1 wing night.
Oh my God. Speaking of which, I mean, I was going to mention this earlier, but did you notice during the scenes where they're at society, the drinks that walk by are like over the top, like fruity looking, like sugary, like neon colored drinks? I'm like, first off, what are those?
Yeah.
And what police officer is ordering that in the middle of the afternoon?
You know,
like, I could be investigating this crime, but I need to pop on over for a Mai Tai.
Listen, I can't quite figure out this guy. He's hit 3 banks in 5 days. Let's go down to society. I got a slippery nipple with my name on it. Oh, man. I am dying to know if society shows back in another episode of this. I somehow doubt it. I bet you all of this is blown to the wind. It's just in the past as soon as they move on to a different episode.
Yeah, I'm sure that set is like repurposed as something else. It'll be like an internet cafe where like a sexy like online modem user is seducing people or something.
Or it'll be like a strip club in like several different episodes or something.
Yes. It's like a lingerie models workshop or something like that.
An aerobic studio.
It's where lady volleyball players work out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
One of those is how it turns out. It's where you hire topless models for your art class or something like that.
Yeah, or it's the studio of an acclaimed fashion photographer who only takes erotic photographs.
You know,
but tonight's snapshot is murder.
Oh, you know what? I love it. I love Silk Stalkings. I very much, and even though it was a bit of a heavier episode, it's still so outrageously a time capsule of its time. It is so uniquely it.
Yeah.
And there are no direct analogs to it. It's its own thing.
It's true.
Really enjoyed it.
And I think this did hit all the hallmarks of a Silk Stalkings like aesthetic. You're right. It's definitely a little grislier than usual, but it's just sort of the hackneyed police work, the outrageous colors and lights, and just sort of the, even though the crime's heavier than usual, like we got to kick through this exposition. So Rita Lee, Lance, and Chris can go have a cocktail.
Kick back and put on those straw hats and freeze frame. It's all done.
The show loves a freeze frame.
It sure does. The one thing I didn't mention, which I just think needs to be said, and we'll kind of go out on this, is that the title Silk Stalkings wasn't just a title. During the first season, Rob Estes' character would constantly refer to the crimes they worked on as Silk Stalkings, literally attempting to make fetch happen. And Thank God it did not fly. They just gave up on it after a while. But those first season episodes were just like, looks like we got another Silk Stalking. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I think this was like real indicative of this sort of like erotic softcore intrigue thriller thing that happened at the time, where they wanted to let you know that this was different. Like, this isn't a sex crime; it's a Silk Stalkings. Or, you know, like I had made the very offbeat comparison to Red Shoe Diaries earlier, and that was it. It was like, Dear Red Shoes. I'm like, who's writing to this guy? Like, who is just like really, really like one, needs David Duchovny's advice and is then calling him Red Shoes. Like, I don't know. They really, really wanted you to be like swept up in the eroticism and candor of it all.
Yeah, I'd love if at the end of every episode, David Duchovny would go, well, that's another one for the Red Shoe Diaries.
Speaking, I mean, I think that like this was a dipping your foot in the water genre in terms of like sexy crimes, sexy times. Because Rob Estes, as we talked about, he stayed on Melrose Place for the first season or two of Silk Stalkings, because I don't know if they knew that if America was ready for the hot and horny stylings of Rita Lee Lance and Chris Lorenzo. And Duchovny, I think that people have forgotten, did like 3 seasons of Red Shoe Diaries as X-Files was starting.
Yeah.
So
well, it's good to have a plan B. You gotta have a fallback crutch.
I mean, that X-Files debuted on Friday night. That is not a vote of confidence, and that show just survived based on word of mouth alone. So yeah, he needed a backup plan. X-Files was not a sure thing. So I think that just about does it. But before we go, Michael, you got a lot going on right now. I know the podcast has been put on pause, but for a very special reason. Why don't you fill in the audience of what you've been doing lately?
Yeah, Dead for Filth is definitely on hiatus for a bit. We will return at some point, I hope, you know, how these things go. It's been very, very prolific and busy in the time since. I had worked with Sam Weinman as executive producer of the upcoming documentary about queer horror that will be dropping on Shudder in June. But in addition to that, I've been doing a lot of writing. I'm doing 3 back-to-back thrillers. Not quite Silk Stalkings-esque, but in the universe for Lifetime later this year. In terms of writing, I've been traveling a lot with some shorts that I directed, and I also wrote a feature film that I can't talk a lot about, but I do intend to shoot later this year as both writer and director. And then for fans who love a little glamour with their kill-by-kill situation, I am the sole writer and one of only 2 directors of Dragula on Netflix.
Oh, that's a great show. It's a fantastic show.
Oh, thank you so much. Season 3 is currently available. You can even see me in episode 4 of season 3 as a guest judge. And we will be coming back for season 4. I don't want the boulets to appear in my home in the middle of the night, so I can't say anything too much more than that. But
that would be a very frightening and sexy occurrence. Speaking of sexy.
I mean, they do love an entrance.
They sure do. Oh man, they not to hype another podcast, but they happened to be on Shockwaves and them talking about how the audience had responded to it and how they had they found the pockets of people who had just needed that to connect to and how that affected them. I was literally weeping in the car. It just was amazing.
It's been a really great experience to be part of, to be honest, for exactly the reason that you're saying. Like, you know, a lot of my work has been about the intersection of queer identity and horror. And I do that kind of my own bizarre little way, but also finding your people and connecting with other people who understand that. And when I met the Boulets a couple years ago, we just sort of knew that we were kindred spirits. And what they do is so remarkable because they really want everybody to feel like they have a voice. They know that drag is sort of getting attention right now, but it's sort of like there's more than one kind of drag. And there's also more than one kind of expression. And it's sort of like from the video store rental era that these 2 creatures were born and created these identities because they didn't feel they had anything else. They wanted to provide a platform that other people who need that and want that have it. They wanted to make the thing that they needed and wanted so other people didn't have to go without. And like the show it's easy to look at the show and be like, oh, well, they're eating spiders or this person's dressed as a vampire or whatever. But what it's really at its core is about community and family. Mm-hmm. And it's been really wonderful to go out into the world. Like I'll go to film festivals or convention. I was in Germany recently and I was screening a project that I did. And afterwards, just seeing these kind of like hip German punk kids be like, we watched Dragula and it means so much. Like we could show our mom and dad, like, you know, this is like, you know, my people, like, and just,
Yeah.
people get to sit and watch it and kind of get a bigger understanding, because it's more than just the monster. It's like you hear the story, and there are a lot of really, really great tearful moments on the show, and it's just been really great. And seeing the people out in the world respond to it has meant everything.
It's fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. So excited for all the things that are coming up and on your way. And of course, we'll have you back as often as we can possibly get you to, so you can talk about it and all that stuff. You're going to be very, very busy, so we'll catch as catch can, but we'd love to have you back. Gina, where can people find you on these here internets?
Well, that's a lot that's a tough act to follow up. I am reviewing TV shows. That's going well.
Sure.
I am recapping episodes of HBO's The Outsider. By the time, this goes tomorrow. So
Yes.
we're up to episode 6 on the show. It's a very good show. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's good
It's a great
stuff.
Fantastic.
I also write for that's at the Spool, where I also do I write about movies and other television shows. I have my own website, which is kind of sort of, I haven't formally decided yet, but might be on hiatus. But if you want to check out what I've written there so far, that's GinaRadcliffe.com. And I am far too frequently on Twitter under Porcelain72.
We're on all the social media places. We'd love for you to review us on iTunes, because it helps us be seen and heard by more people. But you know the drill. Hey, support the show on Patreon. We got a brand new episode that went up just yesterday. We talked about it earlier. 1982's The Seduction. It's a very sweaty and semi-sexy movie that stars Morgan Fairchild and a fair amount of her body, and Andrew Stevens, who stares at her a lot. And that's the vast majority of that 140-minute movie. It's super weird. Colleen Camp shows up and is very sassy and owns a pillow version of a cactus that is in her living room.
There's some really excellent subtle symbolism in which Andrew Stevens presents Morgan Fairchild with a heart-shaped music box, which she proceeds to knock out of his hand and break it.
Oh, no. Oh. If he wasn't such a stone-cold creep, I'd feel sorry for him. But it turns out he is totally a stone-cold creep. Hear us talk about it exclusively on Patreon. Thank you for joining us for Valentine's Day. We'll be back with a regular episode of Kill by Kill very, very soon. So for myself, for Gina, for Michael, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Don't get sexy murdered.